There's a person you've met before. Maybe they're quiet. Maybe they're generous, forgiving, endlessly patient. They seem harmless, sweet even. You'd never expect them to raise their voice, let alone harm a soul. But here's the twist. Behind that kindness, behind that gentle smile, behind all that softness, there's something else. Something darker, something deeper. And Carl Jung warned us, if you ignore that darkness, it doesn't disappear, it controls you from the shadows. This video isn't about villains. It's about you. It's about me. It's about the person who tries to be good all the time, but secretly seethes with resentment. It's about the one who always says yes, but dreams of burning it all down. It's about the person who never learned to confront their anger, their envy, their impulses, so they buried them. But the unconscious doesn't stay buried forever. And Jung's warning is this: the person who refuses to meet their shadow becomes possessed by it. Let's begin with a question that sounds simple but isn't. Are you truly kind? Or are you just afraid of your own darkness? Think about that. Are you kind because you chose it? Or are you kind because you're terrified of what might happen if you weren't? Jung believed that true morality isn't the suppression of the shadow, it's the integration of it. That means you don't become good by pretending you don't have a dark side. You become good by knowing you have one and choosing not to act on it. That is power, that is maturity, and that is rare. In the first minute of this journey, I want you to understand what's at stake. Your soul. Not in a religious sense, but in a psychological one. Because if you live your life only trying to be nice, if you never confront your rage, your lust, your jealousy, your cruelty, you don't become good. You become fragile. You become incomplete. And people can sense it. They don't trust a person who never gets angry. Why? Because that person is either fake or dangerously unaware of what they're capable of.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Jung called this hidden side of us the shadow. It's the part of ourselves we reject, the selfishness we deny, the violent thoughts we suppress, the fantasies we're ashamed to admit. And the more we reject the shadow, the more it controls us. You've seen this before. The overly sweet person who suddenly explodes, the calm leader who has a secret breakdown, the religious figure caught in scandal, the good guy who turns abusive. These aren't anomalies. They're inevitable. Because the shadow always returns, and it returns with interest. So here's a deeper question. Have you met your shadow yet? Not in theory, not as a concept, but face to face. Have you ever looked into your own eyes when you were furious? Have you listened to the voice in your head that wants revenge, that wants to hurt, that wants chaos? Jung wasn't afraid of that voice. He said, you must listen to it. You must learn its language. You must understand what it wants so it doesn't take over when you least expect it. This is where our journey accelerates. Because once you realize that the kindest people must confront their cruelty, you begin to see morality differently. You stop asking, how can I be good? And start asking, how can I be whole? And when you ask that question, your life begins to change. You stop chasing approval. You stop hiding your feelings. You start telling the truth even when it's ugly. And you begin to build a kind of integrity that can't be faked. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone insults you in public. You feel rage. Your hands sweat. Your jaw clenches. But instead of acknowledging it, you force a smile. You say, it's fine, I'm over it. But you're not. That anger doesn't vanish. It just moves underground. And later, you snap at someone you love. Or you sabotage a project. Or you get sick. That's the shadow unacknowledged. Now imagine a different response. You feel the rage. You name it. You say, that made me angry. You don't act on it yet, you just see it. You breathe with it. And now you've done something profound. You've contained the shadow. And containment is the first step to transformation. Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection. It's individuation, the full integration of the self. That means you don't just develop your light. You descend into your depths. You explore your jealousy, your rage, your fear, your lust, your selfishness, and you bring consciousness to it. You don't act it out, but you don't run from it either. You hold it in awareness. You say, "This is also me, and now that I know it, I choose differently." This is not easy. It's not glamorous. It's not Instagrammable, but it's real. And it's the only way to become someone whose kindness is not performative, but powerful. Because when you've met your darkness, kindness becomes a choice, not a compulsion. You're not kind because you're scared of conflict, you're kind because you've mastered conflict. You're not patient because you're weak, you're patient because you know exactly what you're capable of if you weren't. Let me ask you something that might shake you. Have you ever fantasized about hurting someone? Most people have, but they never admit it, not even to themselves. So it leaks. In sarcasm, in passive aggression, in gossip, in self-sabotage. But Jung would ask, why are you afraid to admit your darkness? What if that fantasy is trying to tell you something, not that you should act on it, but that there's a part of you that feels powerless and it wants to be seen? What if your shadow isn't your enemy but your key to freedom? Here's the paradox. The people who do the most damage are the ones who think they're completely good. Because if you believe you're pure, then anything you do must be justified, no matter how cruel. But if you know you have a dark core, if you've wrestled with it, if you've looked into that abyss and not flinched, then you don't need to prove your goodness. You live it, quietly, fiercely, with humility. So I invite you to begin this work not tomorrow, now. Start watching your reactions. Start naming your feelings, especially the ones you're ashamed of. Start writing about your shadow. Start being honest about what you want, what you hate, what you fear. And when you feel that dark impulse, don't act on it. Witness it. Hold space for it. And then ask, what is this part of me trying to protect? What does it need? Because behind every dark impulse is a wound. And what Jung taught us is that healing doesn't come from denial. It comes from integration, from bringing light to the places we were taught to keep hidden. And when we do that, we don't just become better people, we become whole people. And a whole person is a force the world has no idea how to contain. The shadow's gift. How embracing your darkness unlocks your greatest power. Have you ever wondered why your deepest pain often hides right behind your politeness? Why the most giving people sometimes burn out the fastest? Or why those who carry the most light are often the ones who feel the most lost? Carl Jung believed the answer lies in the shadow, not the villain in you, not the evil, but the repressed, the unseen, the exiled parts of your psyche that you refuse to accept because they didn't fit the story you told yourself about who you were supposed to be. And here's the truth Jung revealed. Your greatest strength is hidden in the very place you've been afraid to look. Let's break that down. Think of someone you admire. Maybe they're confident, creative, powerful. Now think about what they had to overcome to get there. You'll find a pattern. They didn't just build their strengths, they transformed their wounds. The confident person had to face crippling self-doubt. The creative one wrestled with inner chaos. The powerful one had to learn not to collapse under pressure. That's not coincidence. That's alchemy. And Jung's message was clear. What you deny becomes your fate. What you integrate becomes your power. So why do we avoid our shadow? Because it's terrifying. Because it makes us feel like monsters. Because it challenges everything we were taught to believe about goodness. But Jung's genius was this. He saw that the very things we fear in ourselves are the keys to our authenticity. That your rage, your lust, your envy, your sadness, they're not flaws. They're signals. They're unclaimed power. And if you can face them, feel them, work with them, you can channel them into art, into leadership, into truth, into life. So why do we avoid our shadow? Because it's terrifying. Because it makes us feel like monsters. because it challenges everything we were taught to believe about goodness. But Jung's genius was this. He saw that the very things we fear in ourselves are the keys to our authenticity, that your rage, your lust, your envy, your sadness, they're not flaws. They're signals. They're unclaimed power. And if you can face them, feel them, work with them, you can channel them into art, into leadership, into truth, into life. But here's where it gets even deeper. Jung believed that the shadow isn't just personal, it's collective. That means the things you hide are often the same things society tells you to hide. Think about it. We're told not to be too emotional, too intense, too ambitious, too sensual, too loud. So we shrink, we edit ourselves, we become good citizens, but inside we're boiling. And Jung warned us, if a society suppresses its shadow long enough, it begins to rot from within. This is how corruption breeds, how cruelty hides behind virtue, how entire cultures become sick with repressed truth. And if you want to change the world, you have to start by changing your own relationship to your darkness. This is why your shadow is not your enemy. It's your mirror. It shows you what you're afraid to become, but also what you're capable of. And the people who do the most good in the world are not the ones who deny their darkness. They're the ones who've befriended it, who've learned to walk into the fire of their own psyche and come back with clarity, humility, and unshakable presence. These are the people who don't need to dominate because they don't fear being dominated. They don't need to pretend because they face the parts of themselves that used to scare them. So I'll ask you again, what part of yourself have you exiled? Is it your anger, your pride, your sexuality, your sadness? What would happen if, instead of running from it, you sat with it? What would it say? What would it ask for? What would it teach you? Jung believed that if we could integrate our shadow, we'd stop projecting it onto others. We'd stop villainizing people who carry the traits we're ashamed of. We'd stop needing enemies because we'd stop being strangers to ourselves. And here's the beautiful irony. The more you embrace your darkness, the more light you actually radiate. Why? Because now your light is real. It's not performative. It's not fragile. It's grounded. It has depth. It has weight. You don't need to pretend to be perfect. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You just are. And in a world addicted to appearances, that kind of presence is magnetic. But this journey isn't linear. You'll face resistance. You'll face shame. You'll face the parts of yourself that make you want to turn away. Don't. Stay. Breathe. Get curious. And remember, you're not doing this to become someone else. You're doing this to become whole. Because until you've met your shadow, you'll always be controlled by what you don't understand. And once you've really met it, you'll never again mistake kindness for weakness or power for cruelty. What if your greatest fear was really your gateway? What if the very thing you've been avoiding is holding the key to your freedom? What if the dark core inside you isn't something to be ashamed of, but something to be transformed? Why owning all of yourself is the only path to inner peace and true power. Have you ever noticed that the people who radiate the most peace aren't the ones who have avoided darkness, they're the ones who have walked through it? They've faced the guilt, the shame, the hidden impulses, the parts of themselves they once feared would make them unlovable. And instead of rejecting those parts, they invited them to the table. They didn't let the shadow drive, but they also didn't leave it locked in the basement. That's what Carl Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole by integrating all fragments of the self. And it's the only way to experience peace that isn't performative, power that isn't abusive, and kindness that isn't hollow. Let's be clear, wholeness is not perfection. That idea has to die. Perfection is an illusion that keeps the ego alive and the soul asleep. Wholeness is something else entirely. It's the ability to hold contradictions without collapsing. To say, I am both kind and capable of cruelty. I am both generous and sometimes selfish. I am brave and afraid. I am light and shadow. When you own all of it, you stop needing to prove anything to anyone. You stop posturing. You stop hiding. You start living fully, honestly, with presence. Jung wasn't trying to make us saints, he was trying to help us become real. And here's the stunning philosophical twist. The people who do the work of integrating their shadow, those who embrace their dark core, often become the most trustworthy people in the room. Think about that. The person who knows what they're capable of, who has stared into their own abyss and didn't run, who can name their darkness without shame, that person is grounded. They're less likely to project, less likely to manipulate, less likely to lash out blindly, because they've already done the battle inside. They've already made peace with their inner chaos. They no longer need to create external chaos to avoid themselves. Now let's make this practical, because philosophy without application is just intellectual noise. Start here. The next time you feel a strong emotional reaction, rage, jealousy, judgment, don't suppress it. Don't push it away. Get curious. Ask, what part of me is feeling threatened? What belief is being challenged? What do I not want to admit right now? Don't answer with your surface mind. Sit with the discomfort. Let it speak. Write about it. Meditate with it. Talk to someone who won't flinch when you tell the truth. Because the moment you witness your shadow without judgment, you begin to reclaim the energy it has been holding hostage. This is the revolution Jung pointed to, not a political one, but a psychological one. A revolution of the soul. Because imagine a world where millions of people stopped pretending to be good and started becoming whole. Where leaders didn't hide behind virtue signals, but owned their capacity for harm and used that awareness to lead with integrity. Where parents didn't project their unlived lives onto their kids, but healed their own wounds first. Where kindness wasn't a mask, but a choice rooted in deep self-knowledge. That's not utopia. That's what happens when enough people stop being afraid of their own reflection. So I'll leave you with this. What part of yourself are you still running from? What emotion, habit, or memory do you keep locked away, hoping no one ever sees it, including you? And what would happen if, instead of hiding it, you met it with compassion? Not to justify it, not to act on it, but to understand it. Because the moment you understand your darkness, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing yourself, you become free. Not because you've silenced the shadow, but because you've become its master. This is the work of a lifetime. It's not sexy. It won't go viral on its own. But it is the foundation of every truly great life. Jung didn't want us to be angels. He wanted us to be awake. Awake to the complexity of being human. Awake to the power of choice. Awake to the truth that our wounds are not our weaknesses, they are our invitations. And when we accept that invitation, when we walk through the fire of our own psyche, we emerge not as saints, but as whole human beings. Capable, clear, kind, and above all real.